for the hardest-hitting show in talk radio. The true progressive voice since 2012. This is Southpaws.
And welcome to Southpaws on the Pacifica Radio Network. We are the leaders of the revolution. I'm Darren Gibson.
I'm Jack Prince.
And Jack, we've got a myriad of topics today. We have to talk about the AP classes on Black history that have just been released. Modified, of course. We'll talk about that. We have to talk about the funeral for Tyree Nichols took place earlier this week. I have some stories out of Michigan, including the minimum wage increase that was supposed to happen has now been temporarily blocked. That's going to the state Supreme Court, so
no surprise.
No surprise there. We have an update about Lake Michigan Credit Union. The guy that was helping to unionize the place has been fired. So we have a boycott for you, folks. Official boycott from Southpaws.
You bet.
Plus, Debbie Stabenow says that she is not running, but who is? We'll find out some names. And, Jack, a story that we have been covering for a while about the schools in Canada and in the U.S. that were, well, we'll just call them what they were. They were basically concentration camps for indigenous children.
They were.
Well, Canada has reached a settlement in a class action lawsuit regarding that. We'll talk about that in just a little bit here. Before we get started with today's topics, a couple of reminders. You can follow us on social media by going to facebook.com/Southpaws Radio Show. Reluctantly, you can go to Twitter at Southpaws Radio and follow us there. You can follow us on Tumblr at southpawsradioshow.tumblr.com. You can follow us on Mastodon by doing a search for Southpaws Radio. You can follow us on YouTube by doing a search for Southpaws Radio there. And you can become a patron of the show by going to patreon.com/Southpaws Radio. You can listen to us anytime you like at Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Podcast Addict, Podvine, and Pandora by doing a search for Southpaws. Once you found our logo, you found us. We send links to our weekly episodes to our Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, YouTube, and Mastodon accounts. You can listen to us on Global Community Radio Channel 1 every Saturday night at 11 Eastern. And you can listen to us on great Pacifica stations, including KCEI in Taos, New Mexico, KZGM in Kabul, Missouri, KEPJ in San Antonio, Texas, WGRN in Columbus, Ohio, and WMTB Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Be sure to listen to us on your local Pacifica station. All right, I tell you what, let's go ahead and let's talk about the AP classes in Florida. We mentioned this in the last couple of weeks that the governor there, Governor Death Sentence, really didn't like these courses teaching Black history. Well, there was a story that came out on Wednesday. I actually saw it on NBC News. The AP board has come out with the curriculum, and they have removed some items, but yet they've claimed, oh, we didn't bow to any pressure from anybody. We're not going to bow to pressure, blah, 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 blah. Jack, what are your thoughts on that?
If I'm not mistaken, Darren, and refresh my memory, what it is that they omitted was the Black Lives Matter contemporary situation.
That was one of them.
The Queer Black section.
And that's the other one.
Now, I would have to guess that on the menu of accurate history, the things that would give DeSantis the biggest indigestion, the biggest pain in the heart, would be Black Lives Matter and queer blacks.
Yeah.
So to say that they did not remove anything with consideration or for consideration of DeSantis is misleading. I personally, having been part of some historical teachings of Black history, think it's sequential. You can't take part of it out. It doesn't make as much sense. Each and every element all ties together for Black history. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it doesn't need to be tampered with. And it's a sad day. It's really a sad day when we have political leaders initiating educational policy that's driving teachers out of Florida, that's driving families out of Florida. Any family who has a gay child going to school, they're leaving. This isn't my assumption. The numbers are there to show it. So the rednecks have claimed their state, and people now are so uncomfortable and afraid for the safety of their children or their grandchildren. They're leaving the state. Mm-hmm. It's incredible.
It is. I have this story. This is Lauren Camara writing for U.S. News and World Report. This is from Wednesday. The College Board unveiled a revised curriculum for its new advanced placement course on African American history on Wednesday, eliminating the requirement that students learn about critical race theory and other modern tenets of Black history, including the works of seminal Black scholars and the entire Black Lives Matter movement that forced a national reckoning with race and equity in the U.S. Now, let me just stop right there. Folks, critical race theory is not taught in high schools. It is taught at the college level in law classes only. It's frustrating that we have to continue to harp this, Jack. It really is.
Well, you need to realize that these monikers like critical race theory, the conservatives love to latch on to a word. Look what they've done with the word woke, for crying out loud.
Oh, yeah.
And they take CRT. Most people don't even know what the acronym is. They don't know what those letters stand for. You really don't have to say that you're going to teach race theory. American history is racism. Just teach American history. Nobody stopped when I was in high school and said, now we're going to talk about the lynchings called the Jim Crow era. Nobody said this is called critical race theory. They said it was history. So to say there's a part of history called CRT that's bogus and shouldn't be taught. The other thing is the 1619 project that the New York Times carried and a woman won a Pulitzer Prize. Mm-hmm. She was just an everyday woman who discovered on her own that there was a boat that sailed into the Jamestown harbor that brought slaves out and sold them for food, trade them for food. And it was 1619. She lived in that area. She'd been to Jamestown. She saw the little buildings out in the back. She questioned those. What are those for? They lied and said they were for ham curing, when in fact they had slaves in the very beginning. And the headwaters of this nation, there were slaves. Now, that's not a theory. That's history.
Yeah.
That is teaching history. When you teach that a Portuguese ship sailed in and slavery started in 1619, not in the 1700s, not in the 1800s. It started in 1619, the very kernel nucleus of the beginning. So if I was teaching history, I think that's pertinent. That's part of our history. Whether I like it or not is inconsequential. Now we have people threading through and obliterating anything that rubs against a positive image of white America.
Yep. The move comes in the wake of mounting opposition by conservative politicians to the leak of a draft of the curriculum that would have required educators to teach those topics, along with Black feminism, queer theory, and other politically divisive subjects that anger Republicans. Students may still choose to learn about those topics on their own as part of a research project, along with the newly added option, Black conservatism. Oh, brother, yeah, we can start there. John Gibbs, who was the idiot that was Rush Limbaugh's assistant for a while, for many years? I just saw a post of his on Twitter.
Lucifer.
No, it wasn't Lucifer. I can't think of his name now, damn it. Let me continue here. But they are not requirements and they are not included on the exam. The College Board announced the creation of the AP class in August and timed the release with the start of Black History Month. But Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, a Republican and likely candidate for president, oh, God, that's gross to hear. That just hearing that, presidential candidate DeSantis, makes me puke.
Me too.
He announced last month that he would ban the teaching of the AP course if the College Board didn't modify the curriculum, blasting the leaked draft as historically inaccurate, and noting that it violates a state law he signed last year that regulates how issues related to race and other politically fraught topics like LGBTQ issues are taught in public schools. Well, I got news for Governor DeSantis. I wish a teacher would push this, because the First Amendment overrules everything else, and federal overrules state. Period. End of story. Try it there, Ronnie.
Yep.
Oh, I hate Ron DeSantis. I absolutely despise him.
I taught critical race theory in my English classes with the list. I asked my students to make a list where white and black are compared, positively and negatively. So you got the White House, you got devil's food cake, you got white cake, you got virgin dresses, or white dress indicates virginity. Our country is in a white house, and the list is incredible. And then I would read to them what Malcolm had to say, his list. And even Muhammad Ali got into the list. It's not just embedded in our political system, in our institutions, which is what they're afraid of to be divulged in CRT. It's laced and woven into our very vocabulary. It's there. And I could go on for 5 minutes with the phrases and words that are denigrating to the word black. Just being black. Your heart, you got a black heart, man. Evil. And this system of racism, it's there. How do I say this? Unknowingly, that we participate unwittingly, and that's what a good AP course would open up people's eyes to. That's the woman who wrote 1619. She was knocked over, realizing history completely omitted the truth about the emergence of slavery in this country.
Oh, yeah, I tell you, the language that we use, it goes back a long way, and people don't even I don't realize it. Some of the creation of some of these sayings, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
That's what the kids said. They said they didn't realize it. The word white is supreme over the word black. We're talking about supremacy. If there was no human beings with dark skin, you could ascertain with just an obvious scientific etymology study, the word black is a detrimental word. It's a word that is stigmatized negatively. It's just that simple. Why? I don't know.
Yeah, we actually do.
Keep the family, right?
Yeah.
On and on.
Oh, it is on and on. I actually want to switch topics here real quick. And I want to get to an update to something we've been talking about for the last few weeks. Ivan Diaz, who up until a day ago worked for Lake Michigan Credit Union, he's actually a Kent County commissioner. He's on the Kent County Board of Commissioners. He's an elected politician. Ivan Diaz tried to unionize Lake Michigan Credit Union. This is what he posted a day ago. This is to his Facebook account. I'm going to read it verbatim. Quote, "This morning I was fired from Lake Michigan Credit Union for my efforts to unionize my branch. Although my coworkers and I were successful in forming the LMCU-WA, the Lake Michigan Credit Union Workers Alliance, LMCU decided to violate federal law by taking this action. This is not the end. It is simply the beginning of the next step in the process. I hope that this shows our state and federal lawmakers that now is the time to protect our workers by strengthening worker protection laws." Yeah, Lake Michigan Credit Union is going to be in deep trouble. You cannot retaliate for union activities. It is against federal law. So Ivan's probably going to get his job back, probably going to get a lot of money for it. At least I hope he does.
Yeah, I do too.
So I tell you what, you listeners in the West Michigan area, let's hit them where it hurts. I'm calling for an official boycott of Lake Michigan Credit Union. If you have accounts there, close them. If you got loans there, refinance them somewhere else. Quit doing business with them. Shut them down. That's the only way you fix these things, is you hurt them financially. Then they'll change. I've said it for over 10 years on this show. If a student has to sue a school, I always say $100 million. Hit them where it hurts. Oh, but then you're going after taxpayer money. Then they'll behave. Do you not get it, folks? People will behave when you hit them financially. Oh. Speaking of hitting people financially, I want to get to this next story here. This is Lauren Gibbons and Paula Gardner writing for Bridge, Michigan. This is dated January 26. Listen to this. A panel of Michigan judges overturned a lower court's ruling that would have raised Michigan's minimum wage to $13.03 an hour and increased the tip minimum wage to $11.73 an hour later this month. The Michigan Court of Appeals decision, which took effect immediately, determined a controversial legislative strategy to adopt and amend ballot proposals before voters had a chance to weigh in isn't explicitly prohibited in the Michigan Constitution, therefore it's legal. Judge Christopher Murray wrote in his opinion, quote, "The absence of any prohibition on the legislature amending the initiated laws during the same session compel the conclusion that the legislature is not prohibited from amending an initiated law enacted by the legislature during the same legislative session." End of quote. The court case stems from a 2018 decision by the Republican-led legislature to adopt ballot initiatives to raise the minimum wage and increase paid sick leave requirements, then quickly water them down. Litigation followed over whether the legislature had the constitutional authority to do so. In a concurring opinion, Judge Michael Kelly agreed that the strategy was legal, but said the legislature's decision to adopt initiatives into law and prevent them from going to the ballot before substantially changing the language was, in his words, quote, anti-democratic, end of quote. Here's what else he wrote, quote, "I cannot believe that this drastic action is what the drafters of our Constitution even contemplated, let alone intended. When the history of this legislature is written, it is difficult to imagine anybody saying that this was their finest hour," end of quote. Well, except for the evil, violent conservatives. They'll be patting themselves on the back for 30 years.
Yeah. Well, when you see these things, like you said, we're not surprised. It's guaranteed there's going to be a roadblock to this. Reminds me of the Memphis. I don't want to go to Memphis yet, but the whole political environment there in the police across the United States, that whenever there was an incident, it was delayed. So when you see things like this issue with the pay raise, it's not legitimate. It's not the wheels of government turning. It is a rejection of a pay raise. I don't care about the small print any more than you could say, hey, did it seem like for years and years that justice was delayed when there was somebody when a policeman shot somebody? Mm-hmm. Yeah, you were right. Look, we saw how fast it could happen. 20 days. These things that take place, we become so accustomed to them that, maybe there is reason that we don't want to initiate that pay raise of $13. Yeah, no, don't fall for it. Don't buy it.
Mm-hmm. Mark Brewer, the attorney representing backers of the minimum wage initiative, said an appeal to the Michigan Supreme Court is planned. By the way, Mark Brewer is a former guest of this show when he was the head of the Michigan Democratic Party. He was actually the first guest on this show. That was when Roy Schmidt decided that he was going to switch parties and get his nephew's best friend to run against him as a fake Democrat, which, by the way, folks, was all pre-planned by the Michigan Republican Party and Jace Bolger. You can quote me on it.
We covered it very closely.
Yes, we did. Brewer said the adopt and amend strategy, quote, is not authorized by the text of the Constitution. It's not something that the voters, when they adopted the Constitution, ever had in their contemplation, end of quote. Now, here's how this would have impacted Michigan. Just over 300,000 workers, 7% of Michigan's workforce, would have seen a bump in wages if they rose from $10.10 an hour to $13.03 an hour. For tipped workers, that jump would go from $3.84 to $11.73.
That's considerable.
Yeah. Business groups warned the issue was broader than the minimum wage. Oh, you got to hear this, Jack. Brian Calley, president and CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan, and by the way, former lieutenant governor under the stuffed turd Rick Snyder, told Bridge, Michigan earlier this month, quote, "Our concern is not just which expenses will go up because the minimum wage went up, it's that the entire wage tier moves up," end of quote. Yeah, because they don't want people to earn money. They want to keep slave labor.
Yeah.
The other initiative, as initially submitted, would have required thousands of previously exempt small businesses to provide paid sick leave to workers. Unions and worker rights groups had called the original Court of Claims ruling, which would have made the 2018 initiatives as originally submitted, the law of the land, a win for employees. But business groups, in particular the restaurant industry, said the ruling threatened dramatic changes from consumer price hikes to possible job losses and closings. Here's my answer. Yeah, don't believe it. They're lying.
This is the same mindset that a Republican exemplified just, I think it was yesterday, when he said, you know, all these lunch debts that are being run up for the children that are less advantaged, they should work. They can wash dishes. Get them to work for that money.
Let's just bring back child labor from the late 1800s. That's your Republican Party, folks.
That's him.
Yeah. Ebony Taylor, executive director of Mothering Justice, a grassroots policy group for mothers of color, and one of the plaintiffs in the lawsuit, called the decision a devastating blow to Michiganders that deserve paid sick time. Lonnie Scott, who's also been a guest on this show, who is also the executive director of Progress Michigan, said the court may have ruled that Republicans' maneuvering was legal, but that doesn't make it right. He told Bridge, Michigan, quote, "The Republicans like to talk right now about inflation and all of these things. This was going to put more money in people's pockets, plain and simple, those with the least among us," end of quote. He's right. From the other side, you're going to love this. Wendy Block, Vice President of Government Affairs for the Michigan Chamber of Commerce, called the ruling welcome news for employers, many of whom, quote, "were struggling with how they could possibly make the sweeping and costly changes called for the lower court's decision and by the arbitrarily imposed deadline of February 19th, end of quote." Yeah, I call her Wendy Blockhead, because that's what she is, a blockhead. She added that without Thursday's ruling, the change, quote, "would have had dire consequences on the state's employers, overall business climate, and economy, all at a time when our state, communities, and families can least afford it," end of quote.
At a time our state, communities, and families can least stand it.
Exactly.
Is there a contradiction in there? We're worried about the business community, but now we're worried about the families. I see.
Yeah.
Evidently, every family in Michigan has a business.
Mm-hmm.
Paying wages.
Yep. Justin Winslow, president and CEO of the Michigan Restaurant and Lodging Association, said anxiety over the deadline had been growing among many restaurant owners, particularly those running smaller, independent, full-service restaurants. The industry is still recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic and battling inflation. Winslow said that going from $3.84 per hour to $11.73 an hour, which is a 205% increase, would have put restaurateurs, quote, "already in a tough position, forced into impossible situations," end of quote. He added, quote, "you would have seen a lot of job loss and a lot of closures," end of quote. Oh, really? Bullshit.
They've never had the creative idea to put a lid on the profits or share the profits of the oil companies. Exxon reported I think $88 billion profit, the biggest profit of any oil company in history. And it's not like they were just eking by before. But to take money from where you have these huge piles of profit and somehow trickle that down to the middle class, it's just too difficult for a conservative economist to figure out how to do that. I got some ideas. You've got some ideas. There's smarter men than either one of us that have talked about how to spread that income out. One of his names is Bernie Sanders. But no, we're not going to do that. We're going to scare people saying your Big Mac's going to jump up 50 cents. Yeah, you're going to lose restaurants. They're going to be closed. That's all bullshit.
It is.
Pure rank bullshit.
It certainly is. I tell you what, if you want to see the example of what happens when you raise wages, go to Seattle. They raised the wages to $15 an hour. Restaurants are thriving there. Why? Because people can afford to go out and eat now.
Yeah. Exactly.
There it is. You know, if you spend money at local businesses, that money stays in the community. Don't you think that works the other way, too? When you pay higher wages, that money's going to stay in the community because guess what? They're going to buy stuff in the community. It works both ways, folks. It really does.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. Speaking of workers who are fed up, Jack, did you happen to see about a week or two ago out of Battle Creek? I'm going to read what I posted on my Facebook. As you know, we support the working class on this show. We definitely support the workers who quit the Arby's on Columbia Avenue in Battle Creek, Michigan, en masse. How do they quit? They put up on the outdoor sign right underneath the little Arby's hat these words, "F*** you, Tria, we quit."
That's succinct.
Yeah. So we dug into this. Yes, it actually did happen. Tria, it's spelled Tria. They are Tria Company, LLC. They are the franchisee of this and 3 other Arby's locations. They also own and operate 26 Burger King locations, according to their LinkedIn page. Those locations are in Michigan, Indiana, Arizona, and California. According to corporate documents on file with the state of Michigan, they have a mailing address in Ann Arbor, but their resident agent and their headquarters is in Battle Creek, very specifically Springfield, my old stomping grounds.
I know it. Yeah. Oh, well.
You know, I asked this question, Jack. How long will it take for the conservative traders to bitch about not being able to get a roast beef sandwich? You know, nobody wants to work.
Yeah, where's the beef?
They have the meats.
Yeah. I marvel. I think as we talk, they're negotiating. Supposedly, they negotiated today, McCarthy and Biden. And we know that whole scam is that McCarthy's going to try and put pressure on to get cuts in programs and cuts in liberal causes, et cetera, et cetera. The big one, of course, Social Security. But I hear that the Republicans, one of the ways they want to cut the legislation that Biden got through was to eliminate huge numbers of IRS agents, because that is supposedly costing more than it's worth. Meanwhile, Bernie Madoff had just released on Netflix last week a show called Bernie Madoff, The Monster on Wall Street. Before he finished his career of swindling, he had dissolved 68 billion fraudulent dollars. He would have told the SEC, which he did, that in a bank account, he had that money, billions of dollars, as security for his investors. They sent him money, and then he would give them supposed earnings every month that they got off of that money at a very high rate, higher than most. This went on for decades. If there had been responsible public workers that would have walked into his office and said, Bernie, we need to know where that account is. It turned out the account started in the number 307. There was a real account. It only had a couple $1 million in it. There wasn't $65 billion in it. They could have saved the nation billions of dollars that went up in smoke. Mm-hmm. But we didn't have the regulation. The SEC didn't just drop the ball. They didn't even know where the ball was. And now we have Republicans that saying, hey, we need less regulation. Forget the IRS. We don't have any cheating going on. We don't have any rich billionaires that are ripping people off. No, they're worried about the single mother trying to scrape by to make sure that kid pays his lunch money, that he stays after school or gets there an hour early to make enough money to pay for his lunch. It is absolutely disgusting. I'd recommend that anybody watch the Bernie Madoff, the new one. There's been other shows. This is the one that just recently came out. It will get you out of your seat swinging.
Yep. They all like to say nobody wants to work. That's code for nobody wants to work for slave wages anymore. Really, they don't. We talked about it on last week's show. The woman up in Canada that was being tracked through work software on her laptop. She was forced to pay back $2,000 in wages that she was not entitled to. That went to court. When does it stop? When does the insanity stop? I don't know. Well, speaking of insanity, we got to talk about Memphis and Tyree Nichols. Did you see the video, Jack? I could not watch it. It's just horrifying.
I did watch as much as I could. I see now they've got extra footage that hasn't even been divulged yet. But what I saw was absolutely sickening the stomach. The cameras there that really are responsible for the greatest view of this, if you can call it that, the best view, I guess, they're on the polls in Memphis. Or we wouldn't even know about it. The report that they wrote, totally filled with inaccuracies, that he tried to grab their gun, that he was sweating profusely, just crazy things. None of which showed up on the footage.
And even then, even if he was, does that justify the death penalty? No jury trial, nothing. Just judge, jury, executioner wearing a badge and a uniform.
Yeah, and what I really can't understand is in this atmosphere right now, you'd think the police across the nation might sober up a bit. And yet last night they had footage of a guy on no legs. He has stumps, legs cut off.
Yeah.
Fleeing from policemen, and they blow him away. They bullshitted that he tried to stab them. They were a good 60 feet from the guy. And he's got no legs. What possible danger? If he had an 8-foot knife, they weren't in danger. It's ridiculous. And they use that as an excuse to shoot this man. Wouldn't you think they'd be a little timid after what took place in Memphis? No, I think they think, well, hell, I got cover now. All the eyes are on Memphis. I can shoot an innocent man that falls out of his wheelchair and is hobbling on stumps to escape. Incredible.
It's just unreal what's happening out there. And one more video that actually, I think it came out of the same night that the Tyree Nichols video came out. Did you see the Paul Pelosi attack?
I did. I had fun with that. I called Wood Radio. Your speakers have been denigrating the reputation of an 82-year-old man, maintaining that he had a gay relationship. He opened the door and let this man in, when now we have clearly on footage a man physically breaking through the window. So your whole conspiracy theory has gone up in embarrassing smoke. And he says, have you seen the video? I said, yeah, exactly. I've seen the video. America's seen the video. You're the one now that's got more than egg on your face. You have been lying about this, and he hung up. So I know exactly how revealing that was, and how many idiots like Hannity maintain this was a clandestine affair. Anything to put mud on the guy.
Yeah, Jack, I've got a list for you. I have a list. This was compiled, and I don't know. It was the New York Times apparently compiled this list. Let me read the headline: Raising Doubts and Amplifying Conspiracies. Here are 21 of the elected officials, candidates, and other prominent figures who spread misinformation or cast doubt on the attack on Paul Pelosi. There's been a call on Twitter to hold all 21 of these people accountable. Should I read the list to you, Jack?
Yeah, I want to hear it.
All right. For elected officials and candidates, They include Ted Cruz, Republican of Texas. Senator Ted Cruz, he amplified doubts that all the facts were disclosed. Next, your girl, Jack, Representative Marjorie Trader Greene, suggested that Paul Pelosi knew his attacker. Representative Clay Higgins, Republican of Louisiana, suggested that the attack involved male prostitution.
Yeah, I heard it.
Yeah. Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson, Republican of North Carolina, he raised doubts about the details of the attack. Republican State House candidate for Georgia, Mary Williams Benefield, she suggested that the attack might have been staged. Minnesota Republican State House candidate Royce White, he claimed the attack involved an extramarital gay affair.
Yeah, that was the big one.
State Senator Wendy Rogers, Republican of Arizona, she suggested that the attack might have been staged. State Representative Anthony Sabatini, Republican of Florida, he suggested that the Pelosi's are hiding vital information. Representative Claudia Tenney, Republican of New York, she amplified a conspiracy theory about an extramarital gay affair.
Yeah, it's beyond mud. It's blood.
Yep, those are just the elected officials. Should I continue? Because I got a whole bunch of media people. Should we go ahead,
Have you heard any sort of accountability?
No, not accountability, not an apology, nothing. And you won't hear it. Oh boy, so here are some of the other prominent figures. Conservative commentator Glenn Beck, he raised doubts about the details of the attack. As did my favorite Tucker Carlson over at Fox Propaganda Channel, same thing.
Well, when he had a break from the M&M conspiracy.
We talked about that on last week's show. Yeah, he made douchebag of the week for that last week.
You should have. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the whole idea in this environment of violence, in this environment of shootings that we just went through, of course we go through them all the time, and the tension, the global tension with the Ukrainian slaughter going on, to today was even worse. And I haven't got time to go through all that. All of that
as a backdrop, and this guy is worried about the shoe change in a brown M&M, indicating that I guess that feminism, there's dangerous feminism out there. It's blowing people away. It's nuking Ukrainians.
That purple M&M was a frumpy lesbian.
Frumpy, yeah.
How did he know that? Oh my God!
What was his word? What would he have to say about the Pelosi thing?
Oh God!
Was it a gay charge?
No, he raised doubts about the details of the attack. Let me continue the list here. We'll give the bull a break right now. He needs some Pepto for his diarrhea problems. Conservative commentator Dinesh D'Souza. Oh, I hate that son of a bitch there. He claimed the attack involved an extramarital gay affair. Ryan Fournier, founder of Students for Trump, he claimed the details about the attacker were fabricated. Yeah. Oh boy. Here's your favorite, Jack. Former Trump advisor and podcast host. They're coming for your hamburgers. They're coming for your pickup trucks. Sebastian Gorka himself.
Oh, wow.
Raised doubts about the details of the attack. Pete Hegseth, who is a host over a Fox Propaganda Channel, he raised doubts that all the facts were being disclosed of the case. Speaking of Fox, Their former star, Megyn Kelly, she raised doubts that all the facts were disclosed as well. Then there's the chief twit himself, one of the top 10 finalists for douchebag of 2022, Elon Musk, amplified a conspiracy theory about male prostitution. Devin Nunes, former representative of California, he repeated a false report that the attacker was in his underwear. Oh, geez. Oh, talk show host Michael Not So Savage, don't call him Macho Man, he raised doubts that all facts were disclosed. Trump associate Roger Stone, who should be in prison, he suggested the attack was staged. And then the orange twit himself, another finalist for douchebag of 2022, Donald Trump, suggested the attack was staged as well.
Yeah. Well, there should be some pushback. I see that Biden now is going after some of these Giuliani and these idiots that have taken his information and dispersed it to the detriment of his life, and they're getting aggressive. And now I don't know where it's at, there was a lawsuit against the false electors here in Michigan. I don't know where that's at. But when these people denigrate a man like Pelosi, there's a lawsuit somewhere. You got to fight these guys. Like you said, if you're going to monetarily fight, boycott, do something. You just can't let them run away with it.
Exactly. Dana Nessel has reopened the state investigation into the fake electors.
Good.
Apparently. So
great.
Yeah, Dana's going to drop their hammer on them, and it's going to be a blast when I see this happen.
Yeah, I'd pay to see that.
Oh, boy. And speaking of somebody that we're glad to see go, I have this story from the Associated Press out of Lansing. She actually announced this a couple of weeks ago. Did you see that Debbie Stabenow says that she is retiring from the U.S. Senate?
Yeah, going to go back to Claire and make chocolate chip cookies.
Oh, is that what she did?
Yeah, she's a homemaker. She's a family woman.
Mm-hmm. Yep, she announced that she is not going to run for a fifth term. The news shocked many Democrats in Michigan. Her impending retirement turns Michigan's next Senate race into one of the most competitive in the country. So now there's talk about who might run. Among some of the Democrats whose names are circulating include Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, who just moved to Michigan. Congresswoman Elissa Slotkin might be the front runner for all this. I'm not really sure. There's actually been talk that perhaps State Senator Mallory McMorrow might run for this seat. That would be awesome. Mallory McMorrow doesn't put up with anybody's bullshit.
Yeah, she's not establishment. Not much.
Not as much as some of the others. One name that was originally talked about that has now officially confirmed that she is not going to run for U.S. Senate is Congresswoman Haley Stevens. She's decided that she's going to stay in the House, which is probably a good decision because she's as corporate as they come.
Well, that was a long time. Senate. That was I don't know how many years. Stabenow was there, respected, and you and I both looked at her as rather tame. But there's a lot of disgruntled Democrats with Buttigieg with the job he's done as transportation secretary, and I don't have the list in front of me. I've heard some things, so I don't know. He might be the big name that heads that list.
I don't know. Buttigieg told the Associated Press that he's focused on his cabinet post and was not seeking any other job. The direct quote is he's fully focused on being transportation secretary.
Yeah, so, I think that's a smart political move. He could improve his work there for sure.
Yeah. On the Republican,
this whole thing with the Southwest, if you look close, there were some real charges against his office.
Mm-hmm. On the Republican side, names that surfaced include John James, who just got elected to the House, who has failed twice to be elected to Senate. John James, he's a veteran. He flew the helicopters and blah, 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 blah. Ugh, gross. Other names include Tom Barrett, the former state representative who lost to Slotkin in Congress this year. One name that's been mentioned that's real interesting, former Congressman Fred Upton, who just retired from the House.
I am surprised at that, at his age and so forth. I would vote for him if you maybe vote for a Republican in front of many others. There's no question about that. Mm-hmm. I'm surprised at that name.
Well, I've got one more name on the Republican side. She has said that she is not ruling out a run for the U.S. Senate, and we are talking about former Michigan gubernatorial candidate Tudor Dixon. Gag.
Yeah.
Stabenow was elected first in 2000, defeating Spencer Abraham. Old Spence, remember him?
I remember that. Yep.
Yeah, I believe he's part of the family that they are food distributors to, like convenience stores and smaller grocery stores. That's Abraham and Sons. Yeah. By the way, Spence Abraham, one of the worst senators to ever represent Michigan, my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree.
He's definitely no Don Regal, which is who he defeated for that seat. By the way, Jack, did you know that former Senator Don Regal endorsed Bernie Sanders for president in 2016 and 2020?
Well, good for him. I never heard that, though.
I never heard that until I started doing a little research for the show this week.
Huh.
Yeah.
Wow.
That is great. That's fantastic. I love this. Apparently, Elizabeth Slotkin is already starting to fundraise for this. She hasn't made an official announcement because there's, certain things that you got to do. But the Associated Press has a great story on that. We've got a link to that on our Facebook page. Go to facebook.com/Southpaws Radio Show. The headline is Slotkin prepares Senate run after winning tough re-election bid. Again, that's Associated Press, Thomas Beaumont and Joey Capoletti writing for the AP.
Yeah. Closer to home, what do you hear from Ottawa County? Have they got the dunk tanks down by the Lake Michigan? Or
we need to dedicate one entire show to that whole clown circus. It is awful.
Yep. And a
it gets
suggestion,
worse.
I also want us at some point to really uncover the whole Medicare Advantage scam. I'm getting calls.
Oh, yes.
Victoria, people are being approached to change, and there's no real official pushback. It's on ubiquitously on TV, around the clock.
Oh, I got an even better one for you. I know a lot of Pacifica stations air a 1-minute segment, and it's the corporate crime report. We used to air it when I ran W in Kentwood. It's a great segment. I just heard an episode, I think, from last week or 2 weeks ago. You know who's silently pushing this Medicare Advantage? AARP.
Oh, AARP, and even the AFL-CIO is endorsing it.
Yep, that was also mentioned by the corporate crime report. Yeah, it's amazing.
People don't get it. They don't understand. I don't want to get into it right now, but Medicare has been a target for so long. Do you think they may have devised a way to do it? They did. It's called Medicare Advantage. Yep. Medicare Advantage is not an advantage to Medicare. Medicare Advantage has nothing to do with the public entity called Medicare. So, I would love to make some notes, and the two of us do even an extra hour or whatever you used to call those programs, because there's not much being said, and it's raking people in. Its life expectancy, its longevity now is extended just up to 2030, and then Medicare is gone.
I tell you what, Jack, we will definitely cover that in a future episode, but I want to hit this one because we've talked about this. We were one of the first shows nationally to talk about these schools that were built mainly by the Roman Catholics and the Baptists to get indigenous children away from their parents, force them to dress white, learn English, etc., etc. I have this story. This was sent to me by our longtime listener and supporter of the show, Pat. This is from the Canadian Broadcasting Company. This was published January 21st. Listen to this. Officials announced that the federal government and 325 First Nations have agreed to settle a class action lawsuit seeking reparations for the loss of language and culture brought on by Indian residential schools in the amount of $2.8 billion with a B dollars.
Mm-hmm.
The agreement still has to be approved by a federal court before it can be dispersed to recipients who filed the claim for collective compensation in 2012 as part of a broader class action known as the Gottfriedson case. Canada agreed to pay the $2.8 billion of settlement money into a new trust fund that will operate for 20 years if the court approves the deal. The fund will be run independent of the federal government, according to officials. The agreement says that the fund organization will be governed by a board of 9 Indigenous directors, of whom Canada will choose one.
Whoa.
So
it's incredible.
It is. The Indigenous people actually get to have a voice in this.
What a contrast.
It's refreshing.
But you really want to infuriate a conservative. You just mentioned the word reparation.
Mm-hmm.
but compare the travesty. This was a horrible crime that we've talked about. It's got nothing on Auschwitz, the anniversary of Auschwitz. They just did a special on Auschwitz last week.
Yeah.
They stole these children. They took them 2,000 miles from their family. They beat them. They sexually abused them. They took their name. They took their tongue. They took their language, their culture, et cetera, et cetera.
In a lot of cases, took their life, too.
Yeah. Hitler's got nothing on him. But it's a grain of sand compared to 400 years of slavery, where hundreds, I repeat, of millions of people were reduced to a machine, to a robot, enslaved, family taken away. Most of them died before they're 25 from malnourishment. You know the story, although they're not going to teach it much longer. Mm-hmm. That, in comparison to what happened in Canada, dwarfs the Canadian tragedy. And yet you can't even bring up the word reparation. You want to talk negotiations, they refuse to even entertain the idea of reparations for black families. It's absolutely a contrast between Canada and America. Do I dare say civilized? You're talking earlier about Western civilization being taught. Remember DeSantis said that we'll teach Western civilization, but we're not going to teach a zombie history. Gandhi came to the United States, and they said, what do you think of Western civilization? And he looked at them very frankly, and he said, I think it's a good idea. What he was saying is that Western civilization is barbaric. Mm-hmm. But you look at the difference between Canada, which is not exactly the most liberal nation, but they're taking almost $2 billion and refunding the ancestors of these people that suffered this racism. That's responsible. That's healthy.
Hey,
that puts a shoe on righteousness. Go ahead.
They're more liberal than we are. They've got socialized medicine. We can't even get that in this country.
Exactly. We committed the greatest atrocity against mankind, 400 years of chattel slavery, and you can't even suggest reparations being paid back. That's shocking.
It is. At a Vancouver event Saturday morning, Mark Miller, the Minister for Crown Indigenous Relations, said, quote, while settlements like those announced today do not make up for the past, what it can do is address the collective harm caused by Canada's past, the loss of language, the loss of culture and heritage, end of quote. Yeah. Miller noted that this was the first time bands specifically were being compensated with the funds set to support the 4 pillars of revival, protection, promotion, and wellness of Indigenous languages and cultures. Yep. Officials say that the plaintiffs in the case developed a disbursement plan for the funds. The Gottfriedson case is named after a former British Columbia Regional Chief, Shane Gottfriedson, who filed it alongside Shishlau band counselor Gary Feschuk. It initially consisted of the combined band reparations claim known as the band class and the residential school day scholars claim. Day scholars are survivors who were forced to attend the institutions during the day but went home at night, they were left out of the 2006 residential schools settlement. The Trudeau government reached an out-of-court settlement with day scholars in June 2021, agreeing to pay cash compensation to survivors and their descendants. That settled part of the Gottfriedson case. But Canada initially refused to negotiate with remaining banned reparations plaintiffs. Their case was heading for trial until it was abruptly adjourned to pursue negotiations last fall. As part of the agreement, the banned class members agreed to fully, finally, and forever release the Crown from claims that could conceivably arise from the collective harms residential schools inflicted on First Nations, as alleged in a previous court filing. So what they're saying is, we're going to pay you this $2.8 billion, but you can never file another claim against the government ever again, at least as far as this part of it.
Yeah, I don't like that.
I don't like that either.
It is an issue up there. It's not even an issue here. And I remind listeners, we were talking about the concentration camp right in the middle of Michigan at Mount Pleasant, years before this was sexy, years before this was an issue. Right here on this show, we talked about Jim Thorpe at industrial school in Pennsylvania. They idolized Jim Thorpe as an athlete, but the hundreds and hundreds of children that lost their heritage and their future. The crime is in our soil here, and it's not even acknowledged. It's not even an issue. At least Canada's got it in the front burner.
Yep. The agreement also says that the legal release would not cover or include any claims that may arise over children who died or disappeared while being forced to attend residential school. So that apparently is going to be a separate issue altogether. So those claims can still be filed. At least that's the way I'm reading this.
Yeah, I would agree.
So interesting stuff out of Canada.
Yeah, there's some civilization on this continent.
Yeah. It might be the only civilization on this continent.
Oh, it is. It truly is. The madness we have here has ruined any semblance of a civilized nation. I agree with Gandhi.
Yep.
Civilization would be great to hit the United States.
One final topic that I want to touch on very briefly, because we are running out of time here. There's a great piece that Tom Hartman published on his website. You need to check it out. Dated January 25th, the headline reads, "A media ceiling is about to fall in on Democrats." So he's talking about what might happen with radio and political spending done by Democrats to focus on Hispanic voters. He gives a great dissertation about this. He talks about what happened with Air America. Air America was thriving. What happened was that Mitt Romney's company, Bain Capital, bought up Clear Channel and started kicking Air America off of all the Clear Channel, which is now iHeart stations. So that was the death knell to Air America. What Tom Hartman says is that progressives need to start buying radio stations. They need to play the same game that these conservatives have for decades. And I agree with them totally.
We've been saying that. We said that the last show. That's the dearth of liberal voice and radio stations. It holds the whole mind of America.
Yep. Can you believe this? We're already out of time for this week.
That's fast.
Yes, it does. Well, folks, we will be back next week with more fun and hijinks. In the meantime, I'm Darren Gibson.
I'm Jack Prince.
Please support independent media, the First Amendment, and a woman's right to choose.
The stations that carry Southpaws do not necessarily share the opinions expressed on the show. Southpaws is protected by the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution and is copyrighted by Big D Entertainment. All rights reserved.